You need to get up and leave right now. People like you don't sit in first class." Those were the words that ended a career. Imagine sitting in a seat you paid for, only to have a flight attendant scream in your face while passengers film you convinced you're a criminal. They thought she was just a helpless teenager in a hoodie. They thought they could bully her into silence. They were wrong. They didn't know who she was dialing under the tray table. They didn't know that in less than 20 minutes, federal agents would swarm the tarmac and the pilot would be crying in handcuffs. This isn't just a story about racism. It's a masterclass in karma. Buckle up. The sliding glass doors of JFK International Airport parted with a hiss, admitting a gust of freezing November wind and 17-year-old Simone Carter. She adjusted the strap of her battered canvas backpack, her breath hitching slightly in her throat. She wasn't nervous about the flight she loved flying. She was nervous about the destination. Washington, D.C. A meeting that could change her entire life. Simone pulled the hood of her oversized charcoal grey sweatshirt up over her twists. She just wanted to be invisible. She checked her phone. A text from her mentor, Dr. Aris Thorne, read, "Just get on the plane, Simone. Don't let anyone rattle you. You've earned this seat. See you at the Pentagon." She took a deep breath. She had earned it. The scholarship she'd won wasn't for sports or charity. It was for cybersecurity. Simone had cracked a decryption code in a national competition that PhD students had failed to solve for 3 years. The prize included a full ride to MIT and a consultancy meeting with the Department of Defense. They had booked her ticket. First class. She approached the gate for Atlantic Skyways Flight 492 to Dulles. The gate agent, a tired-looking man named Greg, barely glanced up as he scanned her boarding pass. "Group 1. Welcome aboard, Mrs. Carter," he droned, handing it back. Simone walked down the jet bridge, the sound of her worn sneakers squeaking against the metal floor. She stepped onto the plane and turned left toward the first-class cabin. It was plush, smelling of leather and expensive cologne. She found her seat, 2A, a window seat with ample legroom. She stowed her backpack under the seat in front of her and sat down, pulling her noise-cancelling headphones out. She didn't turn them on yet. She just wanted to signal that she wasn't in the mood to talk. "Excuse me." A sharp, nasally voice cut through the cabin air. Simone froze. She looked up. Standing in the aisle was a woman in her 50s, dripping in gold jewelry, holding a Louis Vuitton carry-on like a weapon. Beside her was a man in a bespoke suit who looked like he chewed glass for breakfast. "I think you're in my seat, dear," the woman said, though the word dear sounded like an insult. Simone checked her ticket again. 2A, she said softly, holding it up. "This is 2A. The woman whose name was Beatrice Vanderwaal, a name usually associated with old oil money in Texas, scoffed. She turned to the flight attendant, who was busy arranging champagne flutes in the galley. "Excuse me." Miss Beatrice snapped her fingers. The flight attendant, Brenda Miller, spun around. Brenda had been flying with Atlantic Skyways for 20 years. She wore her uniform a size too tight, and her smile was plastered on with red lipstick that seemed to bleed into the cracks of her impatience. She took one look at Beatrice's designer bag, and then one look at Simone's grey hoodie, and her bias locked into place like a deadbolt. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Vanderwaal?" Brenda asked, her voice dripping with sugary falseness. "This child is in my seat," Beatrice said, gesturing vaguely at Simone as if she were a stain on the upholstery. "And quite frankly, she's bringing down the atmosphere. I paid for exclusivity, not a daycare center for runaways." Brenda stepped forward. her heels clicking aggressively on the thin carpet. She loomed over Simone. "Let me see your boarding pass," Sweetie Brenda said. It wasn't a request. Simone felt the heat rise in her cheeks. The other passengers were watching. A man in 3C lowered his newspaper. A couple in 1A and 1B whispered to each other. Simone handed over the paper ticket. Brenda snatched it, staring at it intensely. She frowned, flipping it over, looking for a reason, any reason to reject it. "This says first class," Brenda muttered almost to herself. She looked at Simone with suspicious, narrowed eyes. "How did you get this?" My ticket was booked for me," Simone said, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. "I'm supposed to be here. Booked by who? Make-A-Wish, the man with Beatrice, her husband." Preston chuckled darkly. "Look at her. She probably printed that off a computer at the library. It's a fake." "It's not a fake," Simone said, her voice hardening. "Scan it again if you want." Brenda huffed. "I don't need to scan it to know something is wrong. Listen, we are overbooked in economy. I'm going to need you to grab your little bag and move back to row 34. I'll find a spot for you near the toilets." Simone blinked. "No." The cabin went silent. Brenda's fake smile vanished. "Excuse me." "I said no," Simone repeated, gripping her phone tighter. "I have a ticket for seat 2A. I'm sitting in seat 2A. I'm not moving to the back." Beatrice gasped. The audacity. "Brenda, are you going to let this hooligan speak to you like that? We are Platinum members. I demand she be removed." Brenda's face turned a mottled shade of red. She leaned down, bringing her face uncomfortably close to Simone's. "Listen to me, you little brat. You don't belong here. Look around. Does anyone else look like you?" "No. Now you can walk to the back on your own legs, or I can call the captain and have you dragged off this plane for disrupting a flight. Your choice." Simone looked into Brenda's eyes. She didn't see a flight attendant ensuring safety. She saw a bully who had been waiting for a target. "Call the captain," Simone challenged. The tension in the first-class cabin was thick enough to choke on. Beatrice van der Waal let out a dramatic sigh and fanned herself with a safety pamphlet. Unbelievable. Truly unbelievable. I feel unsafe. Brenda straightened up, smoothing her skirt with jerky, angry motions. "Stay right there," she hissed at Simone. "Don't you dare touch anything." Brenda marched to the cockpit door and knocked the secret code. A moment later, she disappeared inside. Simone's hands were shaking, but her mind was cold, calculating code. She unlocked her phone. She didn't open Instagram or TikTok. She opened a secure messaging app that looked like a simple calculator to the untrained eye. She typed a single message. Status code read: Atlantic Skyways 492. Hostile crew. Obstruction of transit. Need verify. She hit send. She saw the 3 dots bounce for a microsecond before a check mark appeared. Received. The cockpit door opened. Out stepped Captain Richard Rick Sterling. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of jawline that suggested he spent more time looking in the mirror than reading flight manuals. He had a reputation in the airline for being old school, which was code for intolerant. Brenda was whispering furiously in his ear, pointing back at seat 2A. Captain Sterling adjusted his hat and strode down the aisle. He didn't look at Simone's ticket. He didn't check the passenger manifest on his iPad. He looked at the hoodie. He looked at the skin color. He looked at the agitated, wealthy white couple standing in the aisle. He stopped at row 2. Young Lady Sterling boomed his voice, projecting, so the whole plane could hear. "I'm told you're refusing crew instructions." "I'm refusing to give up the seat I paid for," Simone corrected him. "You didn't pay for this," Sterling snapped. "Let's be real. Someone like you doesn't have $3,000 for a 40-minute flight." Now my flight attendant tells me she suspects this ticket is fraudulent. That's a federal offense. Wire fraud. Forgery. "It's a real ticket," Simone said calmly. "Check the manifest. My name is Simone Carter." Sterling laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I don't have time to play games with a stowaway. We have a schedule to keep. These people have places to be. Important places. Now get up. I'm not getting up." Sterling's face darkened. He reached out and grabbed the strap of Simone's backpack. "I said, get up." Simone recoiled, pulling her arm away. "Don't touch me." "Assault," Beatrice shrieked. "She just attacked the captain. Did you see that?" "She attacked him." Preston pulled out his phone and started recording. "I got it on video." She swung at him. "This is terrorism." The twist in reality was dizzying. Simone hadn't moved an inch toward them yet. Suddenly she was being painted as a violent threat. "That's it," Sterling growled. "Brenda, call the gate. Tell them to get the airport police on board. We're deplaning this threat immediately." With pleasure, Brenda smirked. She picked up the cabin interphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We are dealing with a security disturbance in first class. Police are on the way." Simone felt a vibration in her hand. Her phone screen lit up. It wasn't a text this time. It was an incoming call. The caller ID didn't show a number. It just said, "Restricted." She answered it, putting the phone to her ear. "Get off the phone," Sterling shouted. "Electronic devices off." "Yes, sir," Simone said into the phone, ignoring the pilot. "I'm currently at seat 2A. The captain is Richard Sterling. Flight attendant is Brenda Miller. They are refusing to check the manifest and are accusing me of fraud and assault." There was a deep, resonant voice on the other end of the line. "Stay calm, Simone. Do not engage physically. We are tracking your transponder. We see the disturbance. Is the aircraft door still open?" "Yes," Simone said. "We are still at the gate." "Good. Keep the line open. Help is 30 seconds away. Do not leave that seat." Captain Sterling realized she was ignoring him. His ego, fragile as glass, shattered. "I gave you an order," he roared. He reached down to snatch the phone from her hand. Simone, having trained in self-defense due to the nature of her work with sensitive data, instinctively shifted her weight and clamped her hand over the device, pulling it to her chest. Sterling grabbed her wrist. "Let go of her," a voice shouted from economy. A young man, maybe a college student, stood up. "She didn't do anything. She's just sitting there." "Sit down, or you'll be arrested too." Brenda screamed at the student, pointing a manicured finger. "This is a federal safety issue." Sterling yanked on Simone's arm. "You are getting off my plane right now, you little." Suddenly, the noise of heavy boots thundering down the jet bridge echoed into the cabin. It wasn't the rhythmic trot of airport mall cops. It was the heavy, coordinated stomp of tactical gear. Everyone froze. Brenda looked at the door, expecting the Port Authority police, usually a couple of guys in blue shirts with radios. Instead, 4 men in dark suits with earpieces burst onto the plane, followed by 2 uniformed officers carrying heavy rifles. The lead agent was a towering man with a shaved head and sunglasses despite being indoors. He wore a navy blue windbreaker with yellow letters emblazoned on the back and front, FBI. Behind him was another man, older, wearing a suit that cost more than the plane itself. He looked like a shark in human clothing. Captain Sterling let go of Simone's arm, as if it were red hot. He straightened up, a confused smile appearing on his face. He assumed they were there for her. "Thank God you're here," Sterling said, stepping forward and extending a hand to the lead agent. "This passenger is refusing orders, possibly violent. We need her removed immediately, so we can—" The lead agent, Special Agent Clint Walker, didn't even look at Sterling's hand. He walked right past the pilot, bumping his shoulder hard enough to knock Sterling back a step. Walker stopped in front of seat 2A. The entire first-class cabin held its breath. Beatrice Vanderwaal looked gleeful, waiting for the handcuffs to come out. Agent Walker removed his sunglasses. He looked at Simone, his expression softening just a fraction. "Mrs. Carter Walker," said his voice deep and commanding. "Are you injured?" Simone rubbed her wrist where Sterling had grabbed her. "I'm okay, Agent Walker." Walker turned slowly. The air in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. He looked at Captain Sterling, then at Brenda, and finally at the Vanderwaals. "Who touched her?" Walker asked. It wasn't a shout. It was a quiet question which made it infinitely more terrifying. Sterling stammered. Excuse me. I am the captain of this vessel. That girl is a stowaway. I was removing a security threat." Walker reached into his jacket and pulled out a badge, flashing it. "I am Special Agent Walker, FBI Cyber Crimes Division, coordinating with the Department of Defense. The girl you just assaulted is a Level 4 federal asset. She is currently under the protection of the United States government while transporting classified intelligence to the Pentagon." Beatrice Vanderwaal dropped her champagne flute. It shattered on the floor, but the sound was swallowed by the heavy silence. Brenda's face went pale, ghostly white. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Classified," Sterling squeaked. "You just attempted to forcefully remove a federal consultant from a secured transport." Walker continued, stepping into Sterling's personal space. "And in doing so, you compromised a national security operation. Furthermore, we have audio recording of the entire interaction." Walker pointed to Simone's phone. The line was open. Sterling looked at Simone. The girl in the hoodie. The girl he thought was nobody. She looked back at him, her eyes calm, devoid of fear. "Now," Walker said, turning to the uniformed officers behind him. "Seal the exits. Nobody gets off this plane. We're treating this aircraft as a crime scene." He pointed a finger directly at Brenda. "You, sit down. Don't speak." He pointed at Sterling. "And you're done flying today, probably forever." The silence inside Flight 492 was absolute, a heavy blanket that smothered the low hum of the auxiliary power unit. Just moments ago, the first-class cabin had been a theater of humiliation for Simone Carter. Now it was a courtroom, and the jury was armed with AR-15s. Captain Richard Sterling stood frozen, his hand still suspended in the air where he had been pointing at Simone. His mind was racing, trying to reconcile the image of the teenager in the oversized hoodie with the terrifying words Special Agent Walker had just spoken, Level 4 federal asset. "I don't understand." Sterling stammered, his bravado leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. He looked at the FBI agent, then back at Simone, his eyes darting frantically. "She's a kid. She's wearing sneakers. Look at her." Agent Walker didn't blink. He stepped closer, his physical presence looming over the pilot. Walker was a man who had spent 20 years in counterintelligence. He knew how to break a man without throwing a punch. He simply let the silence stretch until Sterling felt the need to fill it with more incriminating words. "I was just following protocol," Sterling said, his voice rising in pitch. "My lead flight attendant, Brenda. She told me there was a disturbance, a passenger refusing to identify herself, a potential threat." In a post-9/11 world. "Agent, surely you understand. We can't take risks." Walker turned his head slowly toward the galley, where Brenda Miller was trying to make herself invisible behind a partition. Brenda, Walker said. He didn't shout, but his voice carried clearly to the back of the plane. "Step out here." Brenda Miller emerged. The color had drained from her face so completely that her foundation looked like a mask of orange clay. Her hands were trembling. "It was Mrs. van der Waal." Brenda blurted out, pointing a shaking finger at seat 1B. She complained. She said the girl was in her seat. "I was just trying to resolve a customer service dispute." Beatrice van der Waal, who had been trying to discreetly kick the shards of her broken champagne glass under the seat, let out a squawk of indignation. "Me. You're blaming me?" "I simply asked a question. You're the one who threatened to drag her off by her hair. You said she didn't belong here because she didn't look like she belonged," Brenda shouted back, panic stripping away her professional veneer. "Look at her clothes. Look at her everything. How was I supposed to know she was with the government?" That Simone said, quietly. Speaking for the first time since the agents boarded is exactly the point. All eyes turned to Simone. She sat calmly in seat 2, her hands resting on her lap. She looked older now, the youthful vulnerability replaced by a steeliness that had helped her crack encryptions that baffled generals. "You didn't need to know who I was," Simone said, her voice steady. "You just needed to check my ticket. You just needed to treat me like a human being. But you didn't. You saw a black girl in a hoodie and you decided I was a criminal. You decided I was trash." She looked at Captain Sterling. "And you? You didn't check the manifest. You grabbed me. You put your hands on me." Sterling swallowed hard. "I was escorting you." "You were assaulting a federal officer," Walker corrected him. He snapped his fingers, and 2 of the uniformed officers stepped forward. Captain Richard Sterling. Walker announced the formality of the words, hitting the cabin like a gavel. "You are under arrest for the assault of a federal agent, interference with a national security operation, and deprivation of rights under color of authority." "Arrest?" Sterling gasped. "You can't arrest me. I have a flight to fly. I'm a senior captain with Atlantic Skyways." "Not anymore," Walker said coldly. "Turn around." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was loud, a distinct click, click, click that echoed through the first-class cabin. The sight of the pilot, the authority figure of the aircraft, being cuffed like a common criminal sent a shock-wave through the passengers. Preston van der Waal, Beatrice's husband, finally spoke up. "Now see here," he said, puffing out his chest. "This is excessive. The man made a mistake. We all have places to be. Can't we just apologize and move on? I'm sure the girl can be compensated. I'll write her a check right now. $5,000. For the trouble." Agent Walker turned his sunglasses toward Preston. "Sir, do you know what the penalty is for bribing a federal official during an active investigation?" Preston's mouth snapped shut. "This aircraft is now a crime scene," Walker declared. "Everyone remain seated. We are pulling the flight logs, the cockpit voice recorder, and the cabin security footage. No one leaves until they have given a sworn statement." He turned back to Sterling, who was now weeping openly. tears tracking through the sweat on his face. "Get him off my plane," Walker ordered the officers. As they marched the sobbing pilot down the aisle past the gawking passengers in economy, who were craning their necks to see the commotion, Simone felt a strange sensation. It wasn't joy. It wasn't happiness. It was the heavy, exhausting weight of vindication. She looked at Brenda, who was now sobbing into a napkin, and her Walker said, pointing at the flight attendant, "Detain her for questioning." She instigated a false report leading to a federal incident. "No, please," Brenda wailed as an officer took her by the arm. "I have a pension. I'm 3 years away from retirement. Please, you should have thought about that before you profiled a passenger," Walker said. As Brenda was led away, wailing, the cabin fell into a stunned silence. Simone looked out the window. On the tarmac below, she could see blue and red lights flashing. More police cars were arriving. She looked at her phone. The message from the Pentagon contact was brief. "The director is aware. Legal team is en route. Hold your position." Simone took a deep breath. The plane wasn't taking off anytime soon. But for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was the one being delayed. She felt like the one stopping traffic. 40 minutes passed. The air inside the grounded plane had grown stale and hot. The APU was still running, but the atmosphere was suffocating. The economy passengers were restless, a low murmur of confusion and anger bubbling up from the back, but the sight of armed agents at the bulkhead curtain kept anyone from charging forward. In first class, the mood was funereal. Beatrice van der Waal sat like a statue, staring straight ahead, afraid to even drink water. Her husband was furiously typing on his BlackBerry, likely emailing lawyers. Simone had been moved. Agent Walker insisted. She was no longer in seat 2A. She had been escorted to the private crew rest area for her safety and comfort away from the prying eyes of the passengers who had watched her being bullied. Outside, a black sedan tore across the tarmac, ignoring the airport speed limits. It screeched to a halt next to the police cruisers surrounding the plane. A man stepped out. He was dressed in a suit that cost more than Simone's entire college tuition fund. He had slicked-back hair, a sharp nose, and the kind of aggressive walk that suggested he owned the ground he stepped on. This was Arthur Pendergast, the Senior Vice President of Operations for Atlantic Skyways. He was the fixer. When planes had mechanical failures, he buried the reports. When staff went on strike, he broke the unions. He was here to make the Simone problem go away. Pendergast stormed up the portable stairs that had been rolled up to the plane's door, flashing a high-level security badge at the officer guarding the entrance. "Let me through," Pendergast barked. "I own this bird." He entered the galley, expecting to see a chaotic crew he could scream into submission. Instead, he found Special Agent Walker leaning against the beverage cart, reviewing a digital manifest on a tablet. "Who's in charge here?" Pendergast demanded, loosening his tie. "I want this plane in the air 10 minutes ago. Do you know how much money we lose for every minute this jet sits on the ground?" Walker didn't look up. "Arthur Pendergast, Atlantic Skyways. We were expecting you." Pendergast blinked. "You know who I am?" "Good. Then you know I can have your badge if you don't clear this theater immediately." "Where is Captain Sterling?" "In federal custody," Walker said calmly, finally looking up. "Along with Miss Miller." Pendergast's face turned a shade of purple. "Custody? For what?" "A misunderstanding over a seat assignment." "Listen to me, Agent. I don't care who that girl is. We have policies. We have rights. You can't just hijack a commercial airliner because some teenager got her feelings hurt." "She didn't get her feelings hurt." "Mr. Pendergast," Walker said, pushing off the cart and standing to his full height. She was assaulted. By your staff. And now I'm looking at the training logs for your crew. It seems Brenda Miller has had 12 discrimination complaints in the last 5 years, and you signed off on clearing every single one of them. Pendergast froze. That's internal proprietary data. You have no right. I have a warrant, Walker interrupted. Digital warrant, executed 10 minutes ago. We have your servers, Pendergast. We have the emails where you called the complainants opportunists and told Brenda to keep a tight ship. Looks like a pattern of systematic negligence. RICO statutes might apply if we dig deep enough. Pendergast swallowed. He realized the bulldozer approach wasn't going to work. He switched gears instantly to the used car salesman. He forced a smile. Okay. Let's not get drastic. We're all professionals here. Where is the young lady, Ms. Carter, right? Let me talk to her. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement. A settlement. We'll upgrade her to... Well, she's already in first. We'll give her a lifetime pass. Anywhere we fly. Free. And an NDA, of course. Walker laughed. It was a dry, terrifying sound. You think you can buy her off with frequent flyer miles? Everyone has a price. Agent Pendergast smirked. Especially people from her background. A lifetime of travel. Some cash for college. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. Why don't you ask her yourself? Walker said, stepping aside to reveal the curtain to the crew rest area. Simone stepped out. She had heard everything. She held her phone in her hand. The camera lens pointed directly at Pendergast. I'm streaming, Simone said simply. Pendergast recoiled as if he'd been slapped. You can't record me. That's illegal. Actually, Simone said, her voice sharp and intelligent. We are in a public conveyance, and New York is a one-party consent state for audio. Plus, Agent Walker gave me permission to document the interaction for my report to the Department of Defense. She stepped closer to the VP. I don't want your miles, Mr. Pendergast. I don't want your money. I have a full scholarship to MIT. I have a contract with the Pentagon that pays more in a week than your flight attendants make in a year. You assumed I was poor because I'm black. You assumed I was uneducated because I wear a hoodie. And that assumption is going to cost you your job. Pendergast stared at her. He looked at the phone. He looked at the live viewer count in the corner of her screen. 24,000 views. The video of the captain grabbing her had already leaked. The passenger in 3C had uploaded it. It was trending #1 on Twitter. #boycott. Atlantic Skyways was trending #2. Pendergast's phone began to ring. He looked at the screen. It was the chairman of the board. He looked back at Simone, sweat beading on his forehead. Ms. Carter, please, turn the camera off. Let's discuss this. There's nothing to discuss, Simone said. You wanted me off the plane. Fine, I'll get off, but I'm taking my story with me. She turned to Walker. Agent Walker, am I free to go? I believe Dr. Kincaid has sent a private jet to the General Aviation Terminal. You are free to go, Ms. Carter, Walker said with a nod of respect. We'll handle the trash here. Simone grabbed her backpack. She walked past Pendergast, who was now trembling as his phone rang relentlessly. She walked past the Vanderwaals, who were huddled together, terrified of the camera she was holding. She walked out of the plane onto the jet bridge steps and took a deep breath of the cold air. But the story wasn't over. The karma had just begun. Because while Simone was leaving, the internet was just getting started. And Arthur Pendergast was about to learn that you can't fix a broken reputation when the whole world has watched the cracks form in real time. The holding room at the FBI field office in Queens was painted a color that could only be described as despair gray. It was a stark contrast to the first-class cabin Brenda Miller had ruled over just 2 hours ago. The air conditioning was humming too loudly, a mechanical drone that drilled into her headache. Brenda sat at a metal table, her hands uncuffed but shaking violently. She had been processed, fingerprinted, photographed, and stripped of her airline scarf, which the officers deemed a potential ligature risk. That small indignity hurt almost as much as the looming felony charge. The heavy door buzzed and swung open. Special Agent Clint Walker walked in, carrying a thick file folder and 2 cups of coffee. He set 1 cup down in front of Brenda, but he didn't sit. He leaned against the wall, watching her. "I didn't mean to," Brenda whispered, her voice cracking. I was stressed. The flight was overbooked. I was just following the hierarchy." Walker took a slow sip of his coffee. "Hierarchy," he repeated, testing the word. "That's an interesting choice of words, Ms. Miller. Because according to the hierarchy of United States law, a citizen's civil rights sit a hell of a lot higher than your platinum loyalty program." He tossed the file onto the table. It slid across the metal surface and stopped inches from her hands. "Open it," Walker said. Brenda hesitated, then opened the folder. It wasn't just the report from today. It was a printout of a forum thread from a private flight attendant group chat. "We found this on your phone," Walker said. "A chat group called the Galley Queens. Do you recognize the username Sky High B?" Brenda's face crumbled. It was her handle. Walker pointed to a highlighted message dated 3 months prior. "Had another one of those today. Hoodies and headphones in 1A. I made him move to row 28. Told him the seat was broken. LOL. Keep the riffraff out." "That wasn't," Brenda stammered. "That was a joke. Venting." And this one, Walker flipped the page. "They don't belong in the front. Ruining the aesthetic. I always find a reason to check their tickets 3 times. Makes them nervous." Walker leaned in close. "This isn't a mistake, Brenda. It's a modus operandi. You didn't target Simone Carter because you thought her ticket was fake. You targeted her because you have a history of systematically harassing minority passengers. We've contacted the passengers from your last 6 flights. 3 of them are filing statements right now, corroborating that you treat people of color differently. That upgrades this from a simple assault charge to a federal hate crime enhancement." Brenda put her head in her hands and began to sob. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll apologize to her. I'll do anything." "It's too late for apologies," Walker said coldly. "You're not just looking at jail time, Brenda. You're looking at becoming the face of discrimination for the entire airline industry. The news is running the footage of you screaming at a teenager on loop. Your neighbors are seeing it. Your family is seeing it." Meanwhile, across the city in the gleaming glass tower of Atlantic Skyways, HQ, Arthur Pendergast was watching his career evaporate in real time on a 90-inch monitor. The stock ticker for Atlantic Skyways ATL was usually a comforting green line moving steadily upward. Today, it was a red cliff plummeting vertically. A TL minus 18.4%. The phone on his desk was flashing 4 different lines. His secretary, a terrified young woman named Sarah, poked her head in. "Mr. Pendergast, the board of directors is convening an emergency Zoom call in 5 minutes. And CNN is in the lobby. Pendergast loosened his tie, feeling like the silk was strangling him. He grabbed a bottle of water, his hands shaking so bad he spilled half of it on his mahogany desk. "Tell CNN no comment," he barked. "And tell the board I'm handling it." Sir Sarah said, her voice trembling, "I don't think you can handle this. Have you seen the new hashtag Pendergast logged on to Twitter? The top trending topic worldwide was hashtag #GroundedForGood. He clicked it. It wasn't just anger, it was evidence. Simone's live stream had emboldened others. Thousands of people were sharing their own horror stories about Atlantic skyways. Videos were surfacing from years ago, grainy cell phone footage of flight attendants being rude, gate agents denying boarding for arbitrary reasons, luggage being thrown. But the worst post came from a user named @Hacktivist0. The tweet read, "Since Atlantic Skyways likes to check people's backgrounds, I thought we should check theirs." Here is the leaked email correspondence between VP Arthur Pendergast and the head of security regarding racial profiling policies. They call it the Visual Screening Protocol. Read it and weep. Pendergast clicked the link. It was a PDF of an internal memo he had written 2 years ago. In it, he had explicitly instructed crews to scrutinize passengers who do not fit the typical profile of high net worth individuals to prevent fraud. It was corporate speak for racial profiling, and now it was public record. Pendergast slumped back in his chair. The Visual Screening Protocol was his baby. He had argued it reduced fraud. Now it was the smoking gun that would bury the company. His cell phone buzzed. It was his wife. He let it go to voicemail. He stared out the window at the New York skyline, realizing that the glass walls of his office didn't offer a view of his kingdom anymore. They just made him an easier target. And in the interrogation room down the hall from Brenda, Captain Richard Sterling was trying to cut a deal. "I can give you Pendergast." Sterling told the agent, sweat dripping off his nose. "I can give you the VP. He pushes us. He tells us to be aggressive. He says, it's my plane, my rules. If we don't enforce his standards, he cuts our routes. He puts us on the red-eye shifts. I was just afraid of losing my seniority." The agent recording the interview, a woman named Agent Diaz, raised an eyebrow. "So you're saying the Vice President of Operations instructed you to target specific demographics?" "Yes," Sterling cried, desperate to shift the blame. "It comes from the top. Pendergast sent memos. He said, we need to protect the brand image. He said, first class is for elite customers, and we should curate the experience." "I'm a victim here too." Agent Diaz looked at the mirror on the wall. She knew Walker was watching from the other side. She leaned forward. "Captain Sterling, if you want leniency, you're going to have to testify against Arthur Pendergast in open court. You're going to have to admit that Atlantic Skyways operated a systemic culture of discrimination." Sterling closed his eyes, visualizing his pilot's license burning to ash. "I'll testify," he whispered. "I'll tell you everything." The dominoes weren't just falling. They were being pushed by the heavy hand of justice. But the biggest twist was yet to come. Because what nobody, not even Agent Walker, knew yet was that the Visual Screening Protocol wasn't just about racism. It was a cover for something much, much darker. And Simone Carter was about to turn the light on. While the chaos consumed New York, Simone Carter sat in the quiet luxury of a Gulfstream G650 cruising at 45,000 feet. The private jet, marked with no logo, belonged to a defense contractor shell company. Across from her sat Dr. Aris Thorne, her mentor. Thorne was a man of few words, a brilliant mathematician who had recognized Simone's genius when she was just 14. He handed her a sparkling water. "You held your composure back there," Thorne said, his voice low. "Better than most field agents." Simone took a sip, her hands finally steady. I knew if I got angry I'd lose. They wanted me to be the angry black girl. I had to be the asset instead." Thorne nodded. "And because you were the asset, you've done more damage to them than a bomb ever could. But Simone, we need to talk about the payload, the data you're carrying." Simone tapped her backpack. Inside was a ruggedized hard drive containing the decryption key she had written. "I thought I was just unlocking a dead satellite feed," Simone said. "That's what the contest description said." "Recover telemetry from a defunct comms boy." Thorne sighed. He pressed a button on the table, and the window shades of the jet lowered electronically. A holographic display projected from the center of the table. That was the cover story, Thorne admitted. "The encryption you broke wasn't from a satellite. It was from a private server farm located in the Cayman Islands. A server farm used by a consortium of international corporations to hide illegal transactions." Simone's eyes widened. "Money laundering." "Worse," Thorne said. "Corporate espionage and safety bypasses. And do you know who one of the biggest clients on that server is?" Simone looked at the floating data stream. She saw the logos. Oil companies, pharmaceutical giants, and then a familiar blue wing. Atlantic Skyways. "No way," Simone breathed. "Yes way," Thorne said grimly. "We've suspected for years that Atlantic Skyways was cutting corners on maintenance to fund their expansion. We think they've been falsifying safety records for their entire Boeing fleet. They use a ghost software to sign off on inspections that never happen. But the records were encrypted with a chaotic algorithm we couldn't crack. Until you." Simone sat back, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. So she said slowly, connecting the dots. "The pilot, Captain Sterling. The plane we were on. Flight 492. Thorne confirmed. "According to the data you just unlocked, Flight 492 hasn't had a legitimate engine inspection in 14 months. The paperwork says it was checked last week. The reality is that the turbine blades are likely micro-fractured." Simone felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cabin temperature. If they hadn't stopped me, we would have taken off. And there is a 40% probability that the number 2 engine would have suffered a catastrophic failure over the Atlantic. Thorne finished. The twist was sickening. The racism of the crew hadn't just been insulting, it had inadvertently saved Simone's life and the lives of everyone on board. By trying to kick her off, they had delayed the flight long enough for the FBI to ground it. "But here is the real kicker," Thorne said, swiping the hologram to a new document. "Look at the list of shareholders who profited from the maintenance cuts. Look at the names of the people who received dividends from the money saved by not fixing the planes." Simone leaned in. She scanned the list of names. Shell companies, offshore trusts, and then a personal name. Preston and Beatrice Vanderwaal. Simone gasped. The couple in 1A and 1B, the ones who called me a hooligan. "They aren't just passengers," Simone Thorne said. "Preston Vanderwaal sits on the External Audit Committee. He's the guy who is supposed to catch the safety violations. Instead, he's been taking bribes to look the other way. He was on that plane to fly to DC, to lobby Congress for fewer aviation regulations. The irony was perfect, distinct, and devastating. The woman who treated Simone like trash was married to the man who was actively making the plane unsafe for everyone, including himself. So Simone said, her voice hardening, "If I turn this drive over to the Pentagon, then Atlantic Skyways doesn't just get sued for racism," Thorne said. "They get shut down for criminal negligence. Pendergast goes to prison, Sterling goes to prison, and Preston Vanderwall goes to prison for fraud and conspiracy." Simone looked at the hard drive. It wasn't just a scholarship ticket anymore. It was a weapon. "How soon do we land?" she asked. 20 minutes to Andrews Air Force Base, Thorne said. "There's a motorcade waiting." Simone pulled her laptop out of her bag. "I need to write some code," she said. "For the decryption?" Thorne asked. "No." Simone smiled, a shark-like expression that mirrored the one Agent Walker had used earlier. "I'm going to write a script that auto-publishes the safety records to every major news outlet the second we hand the physical drive to the general. Pendergast thinks he's fighting a PR fire. I'm about to drop a napalm strike on his entire reality." Thorne grinned. "I knew we picked the right candidate." As the jet began its descent toward Washington, Simone looked out the window. She thought about the way Beatrice Vanderwall had looked at her clothes. She thought about Brenda's fake smile. She thought about Sterling's arrogance. They had judged her based on what they could see. But the most dangerous thing about Simone Carter wasn't visible. It was her mind, and she was about to use it to bring the whole corrupt temple crashing down on their heads. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Mrs. Carter, Dr. Thorne, we are cleared for priority approach. Welcome to D.C." Simone closed her laptop. "Let's go to work." The conference room inside the Pentagon was soundproof, windowless, and smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper. It was a room where wars were planned and treaties were quietly dismantled. Today, however, it was the site of a corporate execution. Simone Carter sat at the head of a long mahogany table. To her right sat Dr. Aris Thorne. To her left sat General Marcus Halloway, the head of Defense Logistics. Across from them sat a team of Department of Justice prosecutors who had been assembled within the hour. Simone slid the ruggedized hard drive across the table. It made a heavy thud, the sound of a gavel dropping. "The decryption key is active," Simone said, her voice echoing slightly in the large room. "The files are indexed. Folder A contains the offshore banking records of the Vanderwaal Trust. Folder B contains the falsified maintenance logs for Atlantic Skyways' entire 777 fleet. Folder C. Well, that's the emails between Arthur Pendergast and the FAA inspectors he bribed." General Halloway picked up the drive as if it were a loaded gun. He looked at Simone with a mixture of intimidation and respect. "You realize, Ms. Carter, that once we act on this, there is no going back. This will cripple a major airline. It will cause a market crash in the transportation sector. Thousands of jobs will be in limbo. They were flying planes with cracked turbine blades." General Simone replied, not blinking. The crash was inevitable. "I just made sure it happened on the stock market, not in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean." Halloway nodded slowly. "Do it." Simone opened her laptop. She didn't just hand over the evidence to the government. She had an insurance policy. She had written a script that would push a redacted version of the safety report to the Associated Press, Reuters, and the New York Times simultaneously. Transparency was the only protection she had against people like Pendergast. She hit enter. New York City, Atlantic Skyways headquarters. Arthur Pendergast was screaming at his reflection in the office window. The grounded for good trend had morphed into something worse. Atlantic Crimes, His door burst open. He spun around, expecting his secretary. Instead, he faced a dozen FBI agents, led by a woman in a sharp blazer, holding a piece of paper that looked suspiciously like an indictment. "Arthur Pendergast," she shouted, her voice cutting through his panic. "Step away from the desk. Put your hands where I can see them. You can't come in here." Pendergast roared, his face turning a sickly shade of grey. "I am a senior vice president. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," the agent said, moving in and spinning him around. "You are under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and 342 counts of reckless endangerment." As they marched him out of his office, the entire floor of employees stood up and watched. They didn't look shocked. They looked relieved. They filmed him with their phones, capturing the moment the tyrant fell. Pendergast, the man who had ordered crews to profile teenagers in hoodies, was now being led away in cuffs. His expensive suit rumpled, his legacy reduced to a mugshot. JFK, International Airport, Gate 42. The scene at the gate was chaotic. Flight 492 had been officially cancelled. The passengers were demanding answers, refunds, and blood. Beatrice Vanderwaal was standing near the podium, berating a terrified gate agent. "Do you know who my husband is?" she shrieked. "He is on the board. He will have your job. We need a private car. To DC." Immediately, Preston Vanderwaal stood behind her, furiously tapping on his phone. "Beatrice, shut up," he hissed. "My accounts. I can't access the Cayman accounts. They're frozen. The screen just says seized by DOJ. "What do you mean?" "Seized," Beatrice snapped. Before Preston could answer, the crowd of angry passengers parted like the Red Sea. Special Agent Walker, having returned from the plane, was walking toward them. But he wasn't alone. He was flanked by Port Authority police and 2 U.S. Marshals. They walked right past the crying Brenda Miller, who was currently being read her rights by a local cop, and stopped directly in front of the Vanderwaals. "Preston Vanderwaal?" Walker asked. Preston dropped his phone. It clattered to the linoleum floor. "I want a lawyer. You're going to need a team of them," Walker said. "You are under arrest for corporate espionage, money laundering, and accepting bribes to bypass federal safety regulations." The click of the handcuffs on Preston's wrists was the loudest sound in the terminal. Beatrice stared, her mouth agape. "Preston, what is this?" "Tell them who you are, Mrs. Vanderwaal," Walker said, turning his sunglasses toward her. "We're freezing your assets too. The jewelry, the bags, the house in the Hamptons. It was all bought with money your husband made by letting dangerous planes fly. It's evidence now." Beatrice looked down at her Louis Vuitton bag, the same bag she had used to shame Simone. An officer stepped forward and gently but firmly took it from her hand. "We'll need that," the officer said. Beatrice let out a wail that sounded less like a human and more like a dying siren. She collapsed onto the dirty airport carpet, weeping not for her husband, but for her status. The crowd, the very people she had looked down upon, watched with cold indifference. 6 months later, the auditorium at MIT was packed. It was the keynote speech for the Future of Cybersecurity Symposium. Simone Carter walked onto the stage. She wasn't wearing a hoodie today. She wore a tailored blazer and slacks, looking every bit the professional she had fought to be recognized as. But on her feet, she still wore her favorite, worn-out sneakers. A reminder. The applause was deafening. Simone approached the podium. She looked out at the sea of faces, students, professors, industry leaders. 6 months ago, Simone began her voice amplified and confident. I was told I didn't belong in a seat I had earned. I was told that my appearance didn't match the aesthetic of success. She paused. The room was silent. I was kicked out of a first-class seat by a system designed to keep people like me in the back. But what they didn't realize is that you can't judge a processor by its casing. They saw a threat. I saw a vulnerability in their code. And when you find a bug in the system, you don't ignore it. You patch it. Or, if the system is too broken, you delete it and write a new one. A screen behind her lit up. It showed a news headline, "Atlantic Skyways files for bankruptcy. Former VP sentenced to 15 years. Flight crew faces civil rights lawsuits. Preston van der Waal is currently awaiting trial in a federal holding facility." Simone continued. "Arthur Pendergast is in prison, and the flight attendant who judged me. She's currently working community service, picking up trash on the side of the highway." The crowd erupted into laughter and cheers. "Karma isn't magic," Simone said, leaning into the microphone. "Karma is just the result of the data you input into the universe. If you input hate, arrogance, and corruption, the output will eventually be a system crash. But if you input hard work, integrity, and courage, the output is justice." She smiled a genuine, warm smile. "My name is Simone Carter. I am a cybersecurity analyst for the Department of Defense, and I belong wherever I choose to sit." She walked off the stage to a standing ovation. In the back of the room, Dr. Aris Thorne clapped slowly, a proud grin on his face. He checked his phone. A notification popped up from Atlantic Skyways' new management, a reorganized company, now under strict federal oversight. They had sent an email to Simone. Subject: job offer. Chief Information Security Officer. Thorne chuckled. He knew she wouldn't take it. She had bigger planes to catch. Wow. Talk about a landing. Simone didn't just get her seat back. She took down an entire corrupt airline empire and cleaned house from the top down. That is the definition of hard karma. It just goes to show that you should never judge a book by its cover, or a passenger by their hoodie, because you never know who is holding the keys to your destruction. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold and love seeing bullies get exactly what they deserve, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. And tell me in the comments, do you think the punishment for the crew and the CEO was enough, or should they have gotten more time? Let's talk about it down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.